All right, so a couple of vlogs ago I mentioned that I've already achieved my goal for the year, and that simply was to make more money than I made last year in poker. And a lot of people are asking me the same question. Ben, what did you do with that money? I guess it's time I address that issue. Because the truth is, well, I spent half of that money on hookers, cocaine, and whiskey. And the other half I just wasted.
If I can see my dream, want a reality.
Ah, yes, it is vlog 190, and in all seriousness, we are heading back into Peppermill. Wednesdays are the new Saturdays. I've said that before, and I expect the action to be insane today. Probably Ken Shamrock's going to be back in there. There's just a whole bunch of guys who, for whatever reason, like to play kind of a weekday schedule, and these are action-giving guys. That wasn't the case years ago when we had that sort of thing going on back in the game over at the Atlantis, which is where I first met Mike Nelson, now who's the manager of the Peppermill Poker Room, back when he was the only winning player in that game, which is kind of fun in and of itself. But it's kind of similar now here at the Peppermill, but we got action guys in the game instead. So it's been cool in that regard, and I fully expect the game to be fun today. By the way, I have a couple of hands, 2 hands to be precise, that I shot on the most recent Vegas trip on my final session there, $2,000 plus pots. And I couldn't just make one vlog out of 2 hands from a Vegas trip, so I'm just going to include those hands at the end of this vlog. So do not tune out when we wrap up the hands here at Peppermill, because you're going to want to see these 2 hands played at Wynn recently. They were both very interesting hands, to say the least. But that said, let's jump in this 5-10 game here at Peppermill and see how things go.
The day before this one was extremely action-packed. It didn't go as well for me as it did for local legend Mr. Z, who won a $7,000 pot full house over full house during a session where chips were absolutely flying the entire time. And I had to hope, as I showed up at about noon on a Wednesday at Peppermill, that the same thing would happen on this day. The session started off nicely. I got a gift from a viewer of the vlog named Craig from New Mexico, who, by the way, has a very stylish pup. He hooked me up with a black Jerry Rice Niner jersey. I couldn't get a hand to play for the first hour or so, so when I got dealt the King 7 of clubs in a limp pot, I opted to see a flop for $10. And come to find out, there's a reason why I normally don't do that, as flopping top pair accomplished nothing more than me losing $75 to a guy with King Jack in this spot. Speaking of which, that proved to be the best hand I'd get in the half hour following that, and I opted to play it, MP1, making it 40. 3 guys end up calling me here, and with 160 in the pot, the flop is Queen 10-8 with a couple of diamonds, giving me an open-ended straight draw and a backdoor diamond draw. I bet $60 here, and both the cutoff and the button continue on. So with 340 in, the turn is an offsuit 3. Obviously, if either of these guys has a draw they've both missed, seemed like a pretty decent spot for a potential triple barrel. I fire 200 at this turn card. The cutoff makes the call with the button going out. And with 740 in, the river is a beautiful 9 of hearts, giving me the straight. I decide to bet 325 into 740 here. And he thinks about it for a second, but only that, and lays the hand down, so I don't get paid off, but take down a nice pot regardless. I then get 2 callers when I get dealt aces. Unfortunately, no more action was given to me on a Queen 3-4 flop. Then local favorite Scott B accomplished the rare feat of having a set be up against 2 guys, both with 2 pair, which would net him a very large pot. 'Twas the night before Thanksgiving, and all through the house not a creature was stirring except the guy making it $30 under the gun. I have 9-5 of clubs in middle position 2 and decide to make the call with the cutoff coming in as well. So I have the 9-5. There's $95 in the pot. And when you drive to Vegas from Reno, you take US 95. And in this hand, we get a Queen 8-9 2-club flop, giving me a pair and a flush draw. Under the gun bets out for 50 here, and I'm obviously not going anywhere. The cutoff, though, raises to 125. The original raiser doesn't take too long at all before calling that bet, and, well, once again, I'm not leaving. It should be pointed out here that these are definitely the two most aggressive players in this game, so a lot of different things could happen depending on how this board runs out. And with 470 in, the turn is the single best turn card in the deck for me. It's the 7 of clubs. Under the gun checks, and I bet out for 200 here. The cutoff thinks about it for a second before jamming all in for about 700 with under the gun going out. I snap call the bet, creating a $1,900 pot in which he showed Jack 10 for the flopped straight, and we take down a very nice pot. This is a mid-session update. While several of the dating apps that exist do work, I have come to the conclusion that roughly 60% of the women on Tinder are either fake or just on there to promote their Snapchats. That's the end of the update. We then get a hijack open to 30, and I 3-bet to 100 with pocket jacks from the big blind, and he calls. So with 210 in, the flop is 5, 6, 7 with a couple of spades, and I bet 100 here. He doesn't think for more than a second before calling me, and with 410 in, the turn is the 8 of hearts, putting a one-liner out there, and now the hijack leads into me for 175. As I mentioned before, he's far from a passive player, so I don't think I can get away with folding jacks here quite yet. And with 760 in, the river is the 4, putting us straight on the board. I wasn't sure if that helped me or if it screwed me. One of those things it definitely did do, as it turned out after the river checked through that he showed queen 7 of clubs and we would chop it up. So that 4 was a brutal development for me. I then switched seats, and the first hand I played there would come when I 3-bet pocket 9s to 95, getting 2 callers, and an ace 9-3 flop. Pretty much a dream scenario. I was expecting this to be very lucrative for me, and I want to start building a pot immediately, betting $125. Unfortunately, one guy admitted to having queen jack here, and I'm guessing the other player couldn't even beat that, and my hopes of prosperity were quickly dashed on that hand. I then call a min-raise preflop with 8-10 of clubs from the cutoff in what is ultimately a 4-way pot. And with 80 in, the flop is 8-6-3 rainbow with 1 diamond, and it gets checked to me. I decide to bet 50 here with top pair, with my only color being the original raiser in the under the gun +1 position. And with 180 in, the turn is the 10 of diamonds, giving me top 2. It gets checked to me, and I fire out 100 here. He thinks about it for less than a minute before making it 300. I waste 0 time, and I snap call that bet. And with 780 in, the river is another 3. He grabs a stack of green and slides it into the pot here for a $500 bet. I felt that he either had a straight, a full house, or a missed diamond draw here with this line. Though I guess it's possible if he somehow managed to be slow playing aces or kings on the flop, now I lose to those hands as well. For the life of me, I could not decide which one of those things this was going to be. But my thought was that if he did have one of those hands, that he'd probably take a line like this. It also just seemed unlikely to me that he would be so convinced he needed to fire this river after I snap called him on the turn. It just felt like I was calling there. There's also a non-zero chance that he has a 3 in his hand, because every now and again he'll show up with some bizarre holdings. So I decided to ultimately fold this hand. He asks if I wanted to see it. I say yes, and he shows 4-7 of diamonds for the missed draw. So I get bluffed in a spot where, in all honesty, I probably should not have been. The second game develops, and I jump into it, but truth be told, it ended up being a bad table change, and I barely got into any interesting hands there at all. Though there are a few things I can point out, one of those being that I did get 3 streets of value with a pair of 7s on a dry board, which was nice. And finally, in what only can be described as a lousy hand to end the Reno portion of this vlog on, I called a raise with Queen 10 and flopped an open-ender, and my decision to take the aggressive route ended up costing me about 200 when I called a raise and ended up breaking out. I ran out of time as I had to go get my son, but still racked up and booked a win. All right, cashing out, still booking a nice win, wrapping up this section of the vlog before I get to these hands from Vegas. I've said this before, there are times where, as a winning poker player, you have to get bluffed. This wasn't really one of those, but I managed to do it anyway. All right, well, recently here on this channel, we had a lot going on. We had the Peppermill Poker Palooza, then we had the emergency vlog with the Randall Emmett session, and I just didn't have time to work in 2 more interesting hands that happened during the last trip down to Las Vegas. It took place at the Wynn Poker Room, so I wanted to get those 2 hands in there right now. First hand comes when I look at the #1 hand ever created and make it 20 in the under the gun +1 position. The player on my left in middle position makes it 85. And it folds back around to me. This opponent, definitely my toughest opponent in the game, and he's not going to give me much action here too late. So I opt to 4-bet this to $175. He thinks about it for a second and makes the call. So with 350 in, the flop is King 10-6 with 2 diamonds. Good news, bad news situation here. Given the fact that I know this player, and he's very solid, means that he's probably only calling a 4-bet for me with aces, kings, queens, or ace-king. Pretty unlikely he has the other 2 aces. I block ace-king. If he has queens, I'm definitely not getting much value out of this hand now. So I decide to just check, planning on betting the turn here to increase the odds that I get called a little bit wider. He checks back, and that card comes a 4. I decide to stick with my plan, betting small, making it 65, which obviously should ensure the continuation of queens at this point. And sure enough, he does call. And with 475 in, the river is an 8. And going off of the same logic, I decide to bet 110 here. He thinks about this for a minute before raising to 450. I already mentioned the range I have him on here, so the only question was, could he turn queens into a bluff? Could he turn ace-king into a bluff to get me off a chop? I figured that it was definitely possible that he could do these things. I also decided that it was just very hard to have a set of kings in general, especially when you're against pocket aces. However, that's a line of thinking that has gotten me in a lot of trouble over the years. Well, it's hard to have that line. Turns out it's not always that hard. So basically, I ended up talking myself into a call in this spot, creating a $1,375 pot, and he shows pocket kings for the slow-played top set on the flop and the turn, and we lose a big one at the Wynn. Then we get a $20 raise from +1 and a call from middle position. I have 9-10 of spades in the hijack and call as well. And with 60 in, the flop is Jack 3-5 all spades, giving me a flush. Action checks to me, and I bet a green chip here. Both of the players make the call, and with 135 in, the turn is an offsuit 8, and again, it's check to me. This time, I opt for a wager of 85, which results in +1 folding. However, middle position decides to make it $185 here. Obviously, I'm not going out here, but it is interesting in terms of what he would be doing this with. So I make the call, and with 505 in, the river is a complete brick. And now he decides to jam all in for $275. Truth be told, I had a bad feeling about this. The check raise on the turn is typically not something you see too often, I don't think, with small flushes. Usually it's a nut flush or a stiff nut blocker in my experience, but he seemed to be playing way too shallow to have that really be a factor here. So I obviously cannot fold and don't see how I could consider to fold. in this spot, but I just did not feel good about making this call. But that said, it's a call you gotta make. So I toss in the chips that he shows. Exactly what I was hoping he would show. 7-8 of spades. Flush over flush. And a $1,055 pot heads our way. So 2 hands at the win. And both of my opponents slow played big hands on the flop. Fortunately for me, I had one of the 2 beat. If you guys go to that room anytime soon, I'd highly recommend that you be on the lookout for that same kind of thing happening to you on a very regular basis. That'll wrap things up on this edition of the vlog. Like, subscribe, comment, and follow on Instagram at bendeach, and we're back here next time.
I've got an itch I can't scratch, I'm missing a piece that completes a whole part of me, an open wound scar to see. Everybody come here, gather round, welcome to the freak show, the best in town. What the hell's wrong with me? I don't get along with anybody, honestly. I've been living in my own head constantly, thoughts jumbled around, think I need a new lobotomy. Wait, all these thoughts are too negative. I don't wanna get lost in the sedative. Gotta show them what I got, I'm competitive. You know I'm about to go off, I won't let them win, I'll take a stab. I wanna chase a bag, I wanna weigh, I can change all the things I